Awaaz.com.
This is the morning brief from the Economic Times, produced in collaboration with Awaaz.com.
Reading or watching the news these last few days has evoked an ominous sense of deja vu. Once again, COVID wards in hospitals are filling up, curfews and partial lockdowns are back, and there's a steady rise of daily COVID cases, which recently breached the 1 lakh mark for the first time since the pandemic hit India last year. But of course, there's one big difference this time around. We now have vaccines.
साथियों, इतिहास में इस प्रकार का और इतने बड़े स्तर का टीकाकरण अभियान पहले कभी नहीं चलाया गया है.
Now, India rolled out its vaccine drive with great fanfare on January 16th. But close to 3 months on, data shows that we've fully vaccinated less than 1% of our population. Now, faced with rising COVID cases, there's a growing clamor of voices that are asking, why can't more people be allowed to take the jab if they want to? There are also questions about the pace of a vaccination drive, especially considering that India is a country that has considerable experience in large-scale immunization. And the other big question, of course, is that if more people are allowed to take the jab, do we have enough vaccine doses? Today's episode will be looking to get answers to all of that and more. From the Economic Times, I'm Indulekha Aravind, and you're listening to the Morning Brief. To analyze India's vaccination strategy, I've invited veteran virologist Dr. V. Ravi, former head of the neurovirology department at NIMHANS in Bangalore. He's also the only Indian on the scientific advisory board for Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. We also have with us my colleague Divya Rajagopal, who's been tracking the COVID outbreak and everything related to it for the Economic Times, and has, of course, come on previous episodes of the Morning Brief as well. Good morning, Dr. Ravi. Divya, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Dr. Ravi, currently India is allowing anyone over the age of 45 years to be vaccinated. But with cases surging every day, there are calls to open this up further. For instance, we had Maharashtra's chief minister writing to the center asking that this age of eligibility be reduced. Taking into account India's current situation of rising cases, as well as our constraints, should we be opening up the vaccination to more people? And if so, how do we go about it?
I would say it is a catch-22 situation. While the need for vaccination is very real, and there are many people who are asking why it cannot be opened up to everybody. The amount of vaccine available is not sufficient to vaccinate all the eligible people or adults above 18 years of age for which it is licensed. India has approximately 100 crore adults, and we need 2 doses of vaccine for everybody. That's 200 crore doses. That kind of availability of vaccine I don't see on the horizon. That's the first. Second, vaccination process requires enormous human resource. You need doctors and nurses, and to do it, it takes time. It cannot be done overnight. So it is going to take at least 6 months to vaccinate everybody. So under these circumstances, the government was constrained to open up vaccination for the vulnerable groups. The first was healthcare workers, the second was frontline workers, and then the elderly, and now anybody above 45. The other aspect of opening up vaccination for everybody is related to equity of distribution. If we allow vaccine to be given to everybody, then the rich and the affordable people will be able to get the vaccine, while those who are poor and marginalized will be left behind. So considering all these situations, the government has taken a phased approach to vaccination. Having said this, for protection to be acquired after vaccination, you require 2 doses plus a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks. So even if we start vaccination now, we are looking at protection probably against a third wave, not for this wave, and that will be 2.5 to 3 months down the line. So these are the practical difficulties in opening up vaccine to everybody immediately.
Thanks for explaining that, Doctor. Now, the other question I briefly mentioned is, of course, the fact that less than 1% of the population seems to have been fully vaccinated so far, with one estimate by Bloomberg suggesting that, in fact, at the current pace, it will take about 2.4 years to vaccinate 75% of the population. So considering that, how could India speed up the vaccinations even if we were to operate within certain criteria and constraints?
I think we should fast track approvals for vaccines that have been licensed elsewhere after due diligence of looking at the data. There are 3 vaccines which are very promising. One is the Sputnik vaccine. The other is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which incidentally is very promising after 1 dose to give protection. And the third is the Novavax. Novavax, I think the Serum Institute of India is tying up with it. So these are vaccines that have been licensed or being licensed shortly elsewhere. So I think if you get those vaccine players into the country, the requirement of doses can be met. But this is a call the government has to take. Apart from that, we already have 2 vaccines. So this is one strategy to increase availability of vaccine. The second biggest bottleneck I see in vaccination is availability of doctors and nurses. This is a vaccine that cannot be given by non-medical or healthcare staff. It requires a half an hour observation. It requires emergency drugs to be in place. It requires a couple of beds to be ready. In case someone develops a severe adverse event, they should be immediately attended to. So this is something people do not understand. They think it's just like walking down, just taking a shot, and anybody can give you a shot. So to do this is probably to have an increased drive in training people, other paramedical workers to give the vaccine. But remember, every site should have a doctor. In case some adverse event occurs, it should be attended to immediately. The other out-of-the-box solution is to probably try out what they have done in other diseases known as ring immunization. Wherever there is a cluster, you go around the cluster, set a perimeter and a radius and say all those people in that area will be vaccinated. But remember, for vaccination to give protection, it is going to take a minimum of 45 days. So whatever we are talking is for the next wave. I really believe that for this wave, the only alternative we have is COVID appropriate behavior.
I think to some extent, possibly people also look at it as a kind of panacea. But you just talked about the availability of vaccines. Now, Divya, the Economic Times recently reported that at least 3 states have told the center that their vaccine stocks are running low. Do you feel that we have enough doses of vaccine, especially if we are, looking at widening the criteria at some point soon in the future?
Well, Indu, I think that is going to be an issue in the next coming months. We just have 2 companies manufacturing the vaccines right now. And what we understand from Serum Institute of India, who are the largest supplier of vaccines in India and also abroad, is that they're going to increase their production to 100 million doses from May onwards. So from May, they're going to increase their manufacturing capacity from the current 60 to 70 million doses to 100 million doses. Yet, as Dr. Ravi mentioned, it's not enough to the scale that we're looking at in terms of vaccination. So if the whole call to open up vaccination for the entire age group, which is the most adult population, seems a bit like a tall feat at this point of time.
And that possibility of a supply constraint must be on the government's mind as well.
Exactly, and that's exactly why, as Dr. Ravi mentioned, we need to relax the criteria on how we go about approving the vaccines. We are not saying just you need to be completely lax in terms of approval, but if a vaccine is approved in some other parts of the world, just like Sputnik V or Johnson & Johnson vaccine, for example, the clinical trials have been done in several countries. Some of the trials have been done in countries which has similar demographic profile like Indians. So we do, and in the past we have approved drugs and vaccines on the basis of global data. So there needs to be some kind of a pragmatic approach that needs to come from the drug regulators side in terms of approving these vaccines and not delaying them any further.
Doctor, you're on the Sputnik Advisory Board yourself. Could you tell us about the status of the permission, when it's likely to be available here in India?
As an advisory board member, I do not have any extra information than what you have. Having said that, let me tell you that Sputnik has applied to the Government of India, and they have been asked to provide the data on the trial results in India. So I think that, in my opinion, the preliminary results will be out by this month end. So hopefully that data should be enough for regulators. I'm presuming it will be enough, along with the global data that they have, to combine and make an application to the regulators.
Vaccination, like many other things in India, has also become a political hot potato. We had the Aam Aadmi Party, for instance, claiming that at the current rate, it would take 15 years to vaccinate everyone. And there are questions being asked about whether we should be exporting so many doses when our own population needs it. Does India's vaccine exports actually pose a threat to our domestic supply, Divya?
Well, Indu, we are at a stage right now where we started off with big fanfare exporting to other parts of the world, which is the right thing to do. I mean, if you ask for my own personal opinion, vaccinating the most vulnerable countries is something that that most countries in the world should be doing it. And India took the lead in that, in terms of making this the whole vaccine Maitri issue. It became like a diplomatic win for India, or at least it was.
Moving on to more breaking news coming in. The world is now banking on India for a COVID-19 vaccine. Prime Minister of Cambodia is also seeking assistance from India for the provision of these vaccines, as the country has now produced its own vaccine, which is scheduled to be rolled out.
If at this stage, if India thinks that it wants to back out from exports, I don't know how this will go on in terms of overall the diplomatic card that it's been playing. Having said that, if you ask me that do the exports pose a threat, it does. But you don't have to be in a situation like this. We are one of the largest vaccine manufacturers in the world. We have the vaccine capacity to manufacture for India and for the rest of the world. The question remains is that how fast do regulators approve the vaccines which are already under clinical trial stage? For Sputnik, for example, has tied up with 5 different Indian manufacturers. If you look at just that number, each of them are expected to manufacture 100 million doses of the Sputnik V vaccine, which is 500 million doses. You have the capacity that you need immediately go up. Let's also not forget that this is a commitment that Indian manufacturers has. For example, Serum Institute of India has signed a contract with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, which is leading the COVAX facility. So they're contractually bound to export to these countries because Gavi has given $250 million through Gates Foundation for upgrading Serum's manufacturing facility. And that amount is not just for India. It's for most of the low-income countries for which Serum is expected to supply the vaccine. So all the diplomatic card that we've been playing will go for a toss if at this stage India decides to back out.
Dr. Ravi, even as some sections clamoring for access to the vaccine, the fact is that vaccine wastage continues to be a very real problem. Is there a way to manage this better? For instance, could we perhaps allow walk-ins after a certain time on certain days rather than letting some doses go to waste?
This is a practice that is being adopted by many countries. I know in the United States of America, people are told to come and wait at 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon. The vaccination is till 6 o'clock. And if registered participants do not turn up, then it is offered to the people who are waiting. So this is one of the ways forward. Having said that, I must say that at this point of time, we must still probably restrict to those who are 45 and above. If we are going to open it up to everybody, then there will be a huge rush, I presume, especially from the educated class, because they know the benefits of vaccine. And that would again offset the equity of distribution, which I alluded to in my first point.
Now, Divya, Maharashtra has also said that, all delivery executives, apart from getting an RT-PCR test, must possibly also get vaccinated. And there are questions being raised about how that might be possible, considering that there is this age criteria. Have they figured out how to go about this yet? Is that being discussed?
So, it's more of a political move at this point of time to put pressure on the central government to open up vaccination for as many people as they can. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why this circular has been issued, that most delivery boys should get vaccinated, or delivery people should get vaccinated. If they don't get vaccinated, the other alternative is that they should be getting tested at least every week. And only after they get negative reports, they should be allowed to get into work, which should have happened even otherwise. We didn't have to reach to this stage to demand negative test reports for essential workers.
So we kind of dropped the ball on that. But there are also reports, Divya, that Serum might be applying for permission for commercial sale of Covishield. What are the chances that it might be available in the market in the next couple of months?
What we understand from the government is that might still not happen anytime soon. The government very much seems like it wants to control the distribution of the vaccines, considering that we do not have too many doses available and we have opened it up for all those who are above 45. So I think this is the commercial use of vaccination is still a long shot.
Got it. Dr. Ravi, in a conversation I had with another doctor recently for a story, I was told that half the COVID cases in his hospital are those that got the first dose of vaccine and then got infected. He in fact called it people with vaccine swag. But on a more serious note, when does immunity actually set in, and when can those who are vaccinated possibly go back to life as we used to know it?
I'm so glad, Indulekha, that you asked this question. All the vaccines approved, authorized for emergency use across the globe, close to 8 or 10, all of them guarantee only protection against severe disease and death, and not against infection. Let that point be very clear and communicated to people. You get protection against severe disease and death 45 days from the first dose. If the vaccine shots are 2 weeks apart, if the vaccine shots are more than 2 weeks apart, then 2 to 3 weeks after the second dose. So we are talking anywhere between 45 to 70 days, depending on the vaccines that are now available. And they do not prevent infection. This is something that everybody has to understand. That is why we insist that COVID appropriate behavior of masking, maintaining social distance, sanitizing hands, avoiding crowded places, closed spaces is extremely important. How long this should continue? I think for another year, till 80% of the people in the globe are vaccinated, or in our own country are vaccinated. Then the transmission will come down. Current vaccines do not provide sterilizing immunity. Sterilizing immunity is immunity that is given for virus at the entry point, like the nose and the upper respiratory tract. We have to wait for nasal vaccines to see if they can provide sterility immunity. If they do, that may be a game changer. It can cut transmission.
If you don't mind, I just want to ask Dr. Ravi one question. What would be the impact of new variants on vaccine effectiveness?
Divya, the honest answer is nobody knows. Remember, what vaccines guarantee is protection against severe disease and death. That's what they have promised, and that they are doing, even in cases of variants. That's what I have understood combing literature and reading it. Yes, certain vaccines are less effective against variants, while others claim that they are equally good against variants. Variants are going to continue to emerge. We'll have to live with variants for two reasons. One, the virus has an enzyme that makes mistakes while copying, which gives advantage to the virus. And second, with vaccination, we are putting immune pressure on the virus. So variants will be there. But let me tell you, I've been telling this again and again, variants or no variants, the best vaccine is social vaccine. We know that masking, maintaining social distance, and maintaining hygiene definitely protects against all different types of SARS-CoV-2.
Very, very important point that you've made, Doctor. And my final question, seeing the daily rise in cases, there's a lot of worry about the second spike, the current surge that we are seeing. How do you see it playing out, and when do you think we might be able to, return to normalcy, so to speak?
If you look at history of second waves across other countries, in fact, many countries are in the third wave and America has entered the fourth wave. So I always tell people the road ahead is very long with a number of humps or speed breakers. That is the way it is going to be, because we cannot vaccinate everybody overnight. Normally, waves last anywhere between 6 to 12 weeks. So my own guess, I may be wrong, I am not a modeler. I don't see the second wave ending before the first week of June. We may be peaking later this month and till the first half of May.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ravi and Divya, for joining us today. Now, much of what Dr. Ravi had said may sound like tough medicine, but nonetheless, they were very important points. At the press conference on Tuesday, the Union Health Secretary had categorically said, and I quote, "The aim is not to administer the vaccine to those who want it, but to those who need it." Now, that sounded like many of us might still have a long wait before the government allows us to get that coveted jab. In the meanwhile, don't forget to mask up, because that's something that the last year has shown us actually works and is not tough to do. You've been listening to the Morning Brief from the Economic Times, and I'm Indulekha Aravind. Today's episode was edited by Nehal Chaliawala and coordinated by Shashwat Mohanty. Send us your feedback to the Morning Brief at timesgroup.com. The Morning Brief airs every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, so make sure you don't miss an episode. Thank you for listening and have a great day.
Avaz.com